The pre-dawn air in Jerusalem was unusually heavy that morning, as Claudia Procula tossed restlessly in her bed within the Antonia fortress. As the wife of Pontius Pilate, the Roman prefect of Judea, she was accustomed to the weight of political tension that perpetually hung over the city. But this was different. The darkness that enveloped her sleep was thick with portents and divine whispers. In the year 33 CE, Jerusalem was a powder keg of religious fervor and political unrest. The relationship between Roman authority and Jewish religious leadership was delicate at best, hostile at worst. Claudia had learned to navigate these treacherous waters since arriving in Judea with her husband 3 years prior. She had studied Jewish customs, learned fragments of Hebrew, and developed a deep fascination with the monotheistic faith of this ancient people. Unlike many Roman nobles who viewed local religions with disdain, Claudia had become what was known as a God-fearer, a Gentile who, while not fully converting to Judaism, respected and followed many of its teachings. This spiritual openness would prove crucial on this fateful morning of Passover, as the divine chose her as a vessel for a warning that would echo through the ages. The dream came in waves of terrifying clarity. She saw a man, unlike any she had encountered before. His eyes held both infinite compassion and unfathomable sorrow. He stood silent before a roaring crowd, his dignity intact despite the abuse being hurled at him. Blood trickled from a crown of thorns that had been mockingly pressed upon his head. But it was not his physical suffering that haunted her. It was the palpable sense that this man carried something far heavier than his own burden. In her dream, she saw the scales of justice in her husband's hands shatter into dust, while a darkness fell over the land that no torch could penetrate. The vision shifted to scenes she couldn't fully comprehend, a temple veil torn in two, graves breaking open, and the sun itself turning black as sackcloth. But most disturbing were the consequences she saw befalling her husband: torment, exile, and a death far from Rome, haunted by the decision he would make this very day. Historical records from this period corroborate the precarious position of Pontius Pilate. Previous conflicts with the Jewish population had already drawn warnings from Rome. The Emperor Tiberius had made it clear that further unrest in the region would not be tolerated. This political pressure would soon collide with the most significant judicial decision in human history. The Roman judicial system of the time placed significant weight on dreams and omens, particularly those experienced by noble women. This was not mere superstition. It was deeply ingrained in Roman legal and religious tradition. The ancient Romans believed that women, especially those of patrician birth like Claudia, possessed a unique sensitivity to divine messages. This belief was codified in various Roman legal texts and religious practices. The Gospel of Matthew provides our only biblical reference to this incident. While Pilate was sitting on the judge's seat, his wife sent him this message: "Don't have anything to do with that innocent man, for I have suffered a great deal today in a dream because of him." Matthew 27:19. This brief verse hints at a profound supernatural intervention in one of history's pivotal moments. Early Christian traditions, particularly in the Eastern Orthodox Church, would later elevate Claudia Procula to sainthood, recognizing her as one of the first Gentiles to acknowledge Jesus' innocence. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church includes her among the saintly women who witnessed to Christ's divinity. As dawn broke over Jerusalem, Claudia awoke in a cold sweat, her heart pounding with the urgency of her vision. The morning air was filled with unusual sounds: the early stirring of crowds, the distant shouts of an angry mob. Something was happening in the city, something that would fulfill her terrifying dream. Her position as the prefect's wife gave her unique access to the political machinery of Roman Judea, but it also imposed strict limitations on her public conduct. The warning she would send to her husband had to be carefully worded, direct enough to convey the gravity of the situation, as yet diplomatic enough to avoid embarrassing him publicly. The historical context of women's influence in Roman politics adds another layer to this drama. While officially excluded from political office, noble Roman women often exercised considerable behind-the-scenes influence. Claudia's warning to Pilate was not unprecedented in Roman governance, but its content and timing made it extraordinary. As she hastily penned her message to Pilate, the sound of the mob grew louder. The man from her dreams was already being led to the praetorium. Time was running out, and the fate of the innocent man she had seen in her vision now hung in the balance, along with the future of human history itself. Little did Claudia know that her dream and her warning would become part of a larger tapestry of divine interventions surrounding the crucifixion. Her vision joined other supernatural elements recorded in the Gospels: the darkness that would fall over the land, the earthquake that would split rocks, and the temple veil that would tear from top to bottom. As her messenger rushed through the corridors of the Antonia fortress with her urgent warning, Claudia could only wait and pray. To what God? She wasn't even sure anymore that her husband would heed her words and avoid the terrible fate she had witnessed in her dream. The message reached Pontius Pilate as he sat upon the judgment seat, but the political machinery was already in motion. Claudia watched from behind a latticed window as the events she had dreamed about began unfolding in the courtyard below. The accused man, Jesus of Nazareth, stood before her husband with that same quiet dignity she had witnessed in her vision. What history rarely records is the complex web of relationships and power dynamics that existed between the key players that morning. Caiaphas, the high priest, had cultivated a delicate alliance with Roman authority that helped maintain peace in Jerusalem. The Sanhedrin, while officially autonomous in religious matters, needed Pilate's cooperation to carry out capital punishment. And Pilate himself was caught between Rome's demand for order and the increasing volatility of the local population. From her vantage point, Claudia observed details that would never make it into the official records. She noticed how Caiaphas positioned himself within earshot of the crowd, subtly directing their responses. She saw the careful orchestration of witnesses, the strategic placement of agitators within the mob. As a Roman noblewoman trained in the art of political observation, she recognized these tactics for what they were. The morning's proceedings deviated significantly from standard Roman judicial protocol. Typically, cases were heard in the basilica, not in the public courtyard. The accused would have legal representation, and witnesses would be questioned separately to prevent collusion. But here was her husband, conducting an impromptu trial before a mob during a Jewish festival, a dramatic departure from Roman legal tradition. Historical sources suggest that Pilate had dealt with religious uprisings before, but this case was different. Jesus hadn't led an armed rebellion or directly challenged Roman authority. The charges against him were primarily religious in nature, the kind of internal dispute that Rome typically left to local authorities to resolve. Yet here was the Sanhedrin, insisting on Roman intervention. Claudia's position gave her unique insight into the political pressures facing her husband. Previous conflicts had already drawn the attention of Lucius Vitellius, the governor of Syria, who held authority over Pilate. The shadow of potential recall to Rome, a career-ending disgrace, loomed over every decision. The irony wasn't lost on her that in trying to avoid political suicide, Pilate was walking directly into the fate she had seen in her dream. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals that the Antonia fortress, where these events took place, was designed with multiple levels and viewing galleries. This architectural detail allowed Claudia to witness the proceedings while maintaining the social propriety expected of a Roman prefect's wife. From her elevated position, she could see what the crowds below could not: the subtle exchanges between temple guards, the strategic positioning of Roman soldiers, the silent communications between religious leaders. The Gospel accounts focus primarily on the public dialogue between Pilate and Jesus, but Claudia observed the private moments between these exchanges. She saw her husband's growing agitation, his attempts to find a diplomatic solution. She watched as messengers hurried between the fortress and Herod's palace, a political dance that would ultimately prove futile. One of the most striking aspects of her dream had been the warning about consequences that would extend far beyond Jerusalem. Historical records would later confirm the accuracy of these premonitions. Pilate would indeed face exile, eventually taking his own life in Gaul, according to some traditions. The temple would be destroyed within a generation, just as she had glimpsed in her vision. The religious implications of the morning's events were equally complex. Judaism had strict laws about dreams and their interpretation, considering them potential vessels of divine communication. The timing of Claudia's dream during Passover, on the very morning of Jesus' trial, carried particular significance in Jewish theological understanding. The parallels between Jesus and the Passover lamb would not have been lost on those who knew Jewish tradition. As the morning wore on, Claudia recognized elements from her dream playing out with horrifying accuracy. The crowd's calls for Barabbas's release, the washing of hands, the purple robe and crown of thorns, each detail matched her vision with devastating precision. She had seen these moments hours before they occurred, yet was powerless to prevent them. The political and religious tensions in Jerusalem had created a perfect storm. The Passover festival had brought thousands of pilgrims to the city, many of whom carried messianic expectations and anti-Roman sentiment. The religious leadership feared losing control over their people. Rome demanded peace at any cost. And in the middle of it all stood a man whose kingdom, as he would tell Pilate, was not of this world. Archaeological findings from 1st century Jerusalem support the Gospel accounts of these events. The recently discovered Pilate stone confirms his position as prefect of Judea. The remains of the Antonia fortress align with the biblical description of the trial location. Even the practice of releasing a prisoner during Passover, once questioned by scholars, has found support in historical records. But perhaps most remarkable was the impact these events would have on Claudia herself. Early Christian traditions suggest that she became one of the first Roman converts to Christianity. While historical evidence for this is limited, the profound effect of her dream and its fulfillment would certainly have left an indelible mark on her spiritual journey. As the morning reached its climax, Claudia watched her husband make the fatal decision she had dreaded. Despite her warning, despite his own stated belief in Jesus' innocence, political expediency won out over justice. The man from her dreams was led away to face the death she had foreseen, while the darkness she had witnessed began gathering on the horizon. The darkness that fell over Jerusalem that afternoon was unlike anything Claudia had ever experienced. From her chambers in the Antonia fortress, she witnessed the fulfillment of every terrifying detail from her dream. The sky turned black as sackcloth, just as she had foreseen. The earth trembled, splitting rocks and opening tombs. The great temple veil, visible from her window, tore from top to bottom with a sound that echoed through the city. The historical significance of these events cannot be overstated. Roman records from the period, though sparse, mention an unusual darkness that fell over the region. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing decades later, would document the mysterious tearing of the temple veil. Seismological studies of the Dead Sea region have even provided evidence of significant earthquake activity during this period. But for Claudia, these were more than historical events. They were the culmination of a divine warning she had been chosen to receive. The profound impact of this experience would reshape her understanding of power, justice, and divine authority. According to early Christian traditions, particularly those preserved in the Eastern Orthodox Church, Claudia's dream marked the beginning of her journey toward faith in Jesus Christ. The aftermath of the Crucifixion brought significant changes to Jerusalem. The early Christian community began to grow, despite persecution. The political balance Pilate had tried so desperately to maintain began to unravel. And Claudia, the Roman noblewoman who had glimpsed the divine through a dream, found herself increasingly drawn to the followers of the man she had tried to save. Several ancient sources suggest that Claudia maintained discreet connections with the early Christian community. The apocryphal Gospel of Nicodemus, while not considered canonical, provides interesting details about her later life. Some traditions hold that she became one of the many prominent Roman women who secretly supported the early church, using her position to protect believers when possible. The theological implications of Claudia's dream continue to intrigue scholars and believers alike. Her warning to Pilate represents a unique moment in biblical narrative. A Gentile woman receiving divine revelation about the innocence of Christ. This parallels other instances in Scripture where God used dreams to communicate with Gentiles, such as Nebuchadnezzar in the book of Daniel. The historical trajectory of Pilate's career followed exactly the path Claudia had foreseen. Within a few years, he was recalled to Rome following a political crisis in Samaria. Ancient sources suggest he faced exile in Gaul, where, according to tradition, he eventually took his own life, haunted by his role in Jesus' death. The accuracy of Claudia's premonition about her husband's fate adds another layer of authenticity to her divine vision. Archaeological discoveries continue to provide context for this period. Recent excavations in Jerusalem have uncovered evidence of first-century Roman administrative buildings, helping scholars better understand the physical setting where these events took place. The discovery of the Pilate stone in Caesarea provided the first archaeological evidence of Pilate's existence, confirming the historical framework of the biblical account. The legacy of Claudia's dream extends beyond its immediate historical context. Her experience raises profound questions about divine intervention in human affairs, the role of women in both Roman and religious history, and the intersection of political power with spiritual truth. Her story demonstrates how God can use unlikely vessels, in this case a Roman noblewoman, to bear witness to divine truth. The early church fathers found special significance in Claudia's dream. They saw it as evidence of God's desire to reach the Gentile world, even at the moment of Christ's death. Her warning to Pilate was viewed as a foreshadowing of the gospel's spread beyond Jewish boundaries to encompass the entire Roman world. Modern scholarship has also noted the unique position of Claudia's testimony. As a Roman noblewoman, her perspective on these events would have been distinctly different from the gospel writers. Her dream provides an outside witness to Christ's innocence, one untainted by religious prejudice or political agenda. Her warning to Pilate stands as an independent attestation to Jesus' righteous character. The practical applications of Claudia's story resonate through the ages. Her experience demonstrates the importance of heeding divine warnings, the conflict between political expedience and moral truth, and the cost of choosing worldly wisdom over divine guidance. Her story also highlights the often overlooked role of women in pivotal historical moments. The theological significance of her dream continues to inform Christian understanding of divine revelation. It stands as an example of God's sovereignty over human events, His ability to speak through dreams and visions, and His concern for justice even within corrupt human systems. The fact that this revelation came to a Gentile woman underscores the universal scope of God's redemptive plan. In conclusion, Claudia's dream represents more than a footnote in the Passion narrative. It serves as a powerful reminder of divine intervention in human history, the consequences of human choices, and the far-reaching impact of spiritual truth. Her experience continues to speak to contemporary issues of justice, moral courage, and the relationship between political power and divine authority. The legacy of her vision lives on in Christian tradition, historical scholarship, and theological reflection. Her story reminds us that divine truth often comes through unexpected channels, and that heavenly warnings deserve our utmost attention, regardless of their source. In the end, Claudia's dream stands as a testament to God's desire to reach all people, regardless of their cultural, political, or religious background, with the truth of His Son's innocent sacrifice.